Some American muscle cars have vanished so completely that even seasoned collectors have forgotten they ever existed. Yet their stories still lie buried beneath layers of dust, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Life moves fast, and I hope you all manage to carve out a little time to relax and unwind. If this video brings back fond memories and puts a smile on your face, I'll consider that a gift. Now, let's dive in and rediscover 15 of these forgotten legends together. Under the trimmed steel of the 1968 AMC AMX lived an idea far braver than its modest badge suggested. AMC took the Javelin's long frame, cut it shorter by a full 12 inches, and created a true two-seater at a time when most Detroit builders were chasing the safer path of four-place coupes. That unusual choice gave the AMX a posture unlike anything around it, a compact sports machine with muscle car instincts, shaped for drivers who valued feel more than comfort. Its strongest voice came from the 390 cubic inch V8, a motor that carried a little over 300 horsepower and felt even more alive thanks to the AMX's lighter body. The way it gathered speed had a raw edge to it, almost impatient, the kind of surge that made old road testers smile as they pushed it through the quarter-mile in the mid-14-second range. With enough room ahead, the needle crept toward 120 miles per hour, proving that AMC had built something far more serious than its size suggested. Even among collectors, the AMX often hides in the shadow of better-known names, yet it remains one of the purest expressions of what American motors once dared to attempt. And if stories like this bring you a little warmth or nostalgia, I would be grateful to have you join American Muscle Soul by subscribing, so we can keep uncovering the forgotten corners of muscle history together. The 1970 Chevrolet Monte Carlo hides in plain sight, remembered by some as a gentleman's coupe, yet quietly carrying the heart of a true performer. Its long hood and short deck carried the calm confidence of a luxury car, but beneath that smooth posture lived the same spirit that made the Chevelle a legend. Chevrolet built it on the familiar G-body layout, stretched just enough to give the car a refined stance, and then offered engines that could turn this polite cruiser into something far more serious. At the top of the line sat the big block 454 cubic inch V8, a motor with well over 300 horsepower and a swell of torque that could push the Monte Carlo through the quarter-mile in the mid-14-second range. In a straight line, it moved with an ease that surprised even seasoned collectors, many of whom expected softness, but instead found a car capable of lifting its nose and charging for the horizon. When space allowed, the speed climbed toward the neighborhood of 120 miles per hour, almost effortless under the weight of its calm exterior. Stories like this remind us how some machines slip from memory even while carrying remarkable strength. And if you have ever seen a Monte Carlo in the wild, or if this one speaks to you in some way, feel free to drop a comment so I know where this forgotten chapter found you. The 1963 Studebaker Lark looks almost too humble to earn a place in any muscle story. Its straight-edged body, its quiet three-box shape, none of it hints at the strength tucked beneath that unassuming hood. Yet those who lived close to the industry remember how Studebaker, in its final flashes of boldness, slipped a powerful 289 cubic inch V8 into this modest frame, and in certain trims, even added a breath of forced power that turned the little Lark into something far more dangerous than it appeared. Road testers who expected a sleepy commuter found themselves gripping the wheel as the car rushed through the quarter-mile in the low 14-second range, with real-world runs dipping even quicker when tuned with care. Out on the flats, a properly prepared Lark could push past 130 miles per hour, its simple shape cutting the air with surprising confidence. Stories from Bonneville tell of a supercharged example touching speeds that embarrassed sedans twice its size. Collectors often overlook the Lark because its glory was never shouted. Even its rare high-performance versions were quietly offered, barely advertised, almost hidden in the catalog. But for those who value a true sleeper, a machine that wore modesty like a disguise, the Lark remains one of the most startling reminders of how easily muscle can hide in plain sight. The 1966 Chevrolet Corvair Yenko Stinger is one of those machines people forget until someone opens the garage door and reveals what it truly was. At first glance, it looks like a compact from another era, a simple little coupe with an air-cooled flat six tucked behind its rear wheels. Many dismissed it after the turbulence stirred by that famous safety book of the 60s, believing the Corvair to be unpredictable, even fragile. Yet behind all the noise lived a platform with far more potential than its reputation ever allowed. When Don Yenko gathered a small batch of Corvairs and began reshaping them, the car found its second life. The flat six gained real muscle through careful tuning, climbing toward the neighborhood of 240 horsepower, while heavy-duty suspension, faster steering, and a limited-slip rear end steadied the car in ways few expected. In the hands of someone who knew its rhythm, the Stinger could carve through corners with an eagerness that startled even seasoned drivers. It felt light on its feet, alive, almost impatient to prove just how wrong the world had been. Collectors still speak softly about the Stinger because so many overlooked it in its day. Yet for those who chase the rare moments when engineering courage outpaces public opinion, this forgotten Corvair stands as one of the most surprising American creations of its time. The 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt was never meant for neighborhood streets. It was born from the noise and heartbeat of drag strips, built when Ford decided it would not watch the early 60s horsepower war from the sidelines. Engineers took the compact Fairlane shell, a body far lighter than the company's full-size offerings, and slipped inside it the enormous 427 cubic inch V8, usually reserved for heavier machines. The result was not a car in the usual sense, but a purpose-built projectile, a factory racer shaped to conquer the superstock lanes. Those who saw a Thunderbolt launch remember the feeling more than the numbers. They speak of an engine whose official rating whispered modest strength, even though many believed its true output lived far beyond the printed figures. They recall the way the rear tires clawed at the pavement, the nose lifting as the long block came alive, pulling the Fairlane forward with a force that startled anyone who mistook it for a simple family coupe. Quarter-mile times and top speeds were whispered more than recorded, partly because each Thunderbolt was tuned by racers who pushed them past anything the factory sheets dared to claim. Only a small run of these machines was ever assembled, making surviving Thunderbolts rare enough that collectors sometimes forget they exist until one appears, raw and commanding, like a relic from a louder world, and in that moment, the Thunderbolt reminds you why muscle history is never complete without the cars built not to sell, but to win. The 1963 Chevrolet Impala Sport Coupe Z11 hides within one of the most familiar names in American car history. Impalas rolled out of the factory by the millions, filling driveways, cruising boulevards, and later becoming icons of lowrider culture. The name is so common that few imagine it ever carried a secret. Yet, for a single remarkable year, Chevrolet created a version almost no one saw, and even fewer remember. The Z11 began as a purpose-built racer, shaped quietly inside Chevrolet's performance circles. Beneath its familiar coupe body rested a race-tuned 427 cubic inch V8, the kind of engine meant not for showrooms but for the drag strip and the long oval of competition. Stories from collectors say the car was built in only a small handful, no more than a few dozen, each one crafted with lighter aluminum panels to shave weight from the standard Impala's heavy frame. It looked like any other full-size Chevy at first glance, yet held the heart of something far more ferocious. Drivers who were fortunate enough to witness a Z11 in motion recall the way the big block surged forward, as if freed from the burden of its own size. It was a rare moment, when a car designed for circulation in the millions produced a version meant purely for speed. Today, even seasoned collectors admit they sometimes forget the Z11 existed at all, until a survivor resurfaces and reminds them that even the most common names can hide the most astonishing stories. The 1968 AMC Javelin carries the kind of story that slips past even seasoned collectors, partly because it came from the smallest name in Detroit's muscle race. American Motors knew it stood in the shadow of the Big Three, yet it still stepped forward with a lean, lightweight coupe meant to stare down Mustangs, Camaros, and Challengers. The Javelin was built with a sense of determination. Its body stretched just enough to look confident, its stance balanced between grace and grit. Beneath that, calm sheet metal-weighted engines that ranged from the modest 290 cubic inch V8 to the stronger 390 version, a motor that gave the Javelin a punch many drivers did not expect from a company fighting above its weight. Some of the rarest stories revolve around the Trans Am edition, a tiny run of cars finished in red, white, and blue, created so AMC could prove itself in competition. Only a small handful were ever built, and the sight of one today can stop a collector in their tracks. The lighter frame and willing V8 gave the Javelin a pace that surprised those who assumed its size meant softness. Machines like this remind us that muscle history is wider than the familiar giants, and if you are still with me at this point in the journey, drop a simple number 1 below so I know this forgotten warrior still has someone in its corner. The 1966 Plymouth Belvedere Satellite is one of those machines that slip through the cracks of memory, overshadowed by louder Mopar legends that came after it. Yet, beneath its modest mid-size lines, lived a heart that could stand beside the greatest. When Plymouth shifted the Belvedere into a leaner, more focused shape, the Satellite trim emerged as the quiet flagship, a car that looked polite until someone ordered the legendary Street Hemi 426 cubic inch V8. That engine did not announce itself with bravado. It carried a deep and confident rumble, the kind that told you power was present long before the throttle moved. In a straight run, the Satellite with the Hemi felt nothing like a mid-size family car. It rose with a steady surge, the hood leveling toward the horizon, as though the road itself stepped aside. Drivers who underestimated it learned quickly why champions trusted the Hemi, and why stories of its strength still echo long after the badges faded. Collectors rarely speak of the Satellite, choosing instead the bright names that grew from its lineage. But anyone who knows the old Mopar roads understands that this car was the quiet beginning, the steady pulse before the storm. If you are still with me on this journey of forgotten muscle, drop a simple word, Satellite, below, just so I know this overlooked fighter still has someone listening. The 1965 Pontiac 2+2 is one of those giants that history somehow misplaced, a full-size performer overshadowed by its smaller sibling, the famous Goat. While the GTO drew the spotlight with its leaner shape, the 2+2 arrived with a deeper voice and a broader stride, carrying a big body wrapped around an even bigger V8. Pontiac promoted it as the elder brother, a machine for drivers who wanted strength without surrendering comfort, and for a moment, it seemed ready to carve out a place of its own. Its heart came from a large cubic inch V8 that pushed well beyond the power figures most people associate with Pontiac in the mid-60s. Slide behind the wheel, and the engine answered with a slow-building growl, the kind that hinted at more torque than the casual eye would guess. Even though official records today are thin, those who lived through that era still talk about the 2+2 lifting its nose and pulling the long hood forward with surprising urgency, a full-size coupe, moving with the intention of something much smaller. Collectors rarely mention it now. They hunt the smaller legends, the mid-size heroes, forgetting that Pontiac once built a heavyweight challenger with grace and muscle in equal measure. And for those who enjoy rediscovering the paths that muscle history nearly forgot, the 2+2 stands as a reminder that power sometimes disappears from memory not because it was weak, but because it was never meant to shout. The 1964 Mercury Comet Cyclone GT came from a corner of Detroit most enthusiasts rarely look toward, a place where Mercury quietly built machines that lived in the shadow of Mustangs and Torinos. The Cyclone GT was born for a purpose rather than for fame. Mercury wanted a lightweight body that could channel the wild energy of a large cubic inch V8, and the compact bones of the Comet offered exactly that. Shared with the Fairlane yet lighter on its feet, the Comet became a foundation for something far more daring. According to those who watched the era unfold, Mercury prepared a small handful of Cyclone bodies and fitted them with the mighty 427 cubic inch engines, creating weapons intended for factory experimental drag competition. That world, known as AFX, was less a class and more a proving ground, a place where rules bent under the weight of horsepower and creativity. Out there, the Cyclone GT was no quiet understudy. It surged forward with a ferocity that startled those who did not expect a Mercury to behave like that. The legend grew louder when Wild Bill Shrewsbury, later known for showstoppers like the Hemi under glass, steered a Cyclone through the AFX ranks with fearless confidence. For a brief moment, this overlooked Mercury stood at the front of the Ford family, a bright streak of power in a brand better known for calm and comfort. Collectors today often forget it existed at all, which only makes its surviving stories feel more like buried treasure, rediscovered in the dust. The 1963 Dodge 440 is one of those machines whose identity slipped through the cracks of time. It lived in a strange moment when Dodge was reshaping nearly everything in its lineup. What had once been a mid-size Dart became a compact, and the name 440 moved in to fill the empty space, carrying pieces of the past and hints of what would soon become the Polara. Even collectors today struggle to place it, unsure whether it belongs to one chapter or the next. Its body carried the square-shouldered look of early 60s. Detroit, honest and almost plain, the kind of car you could pass on the street without a second glance. Yet beneath that modest sheet metal, Dodge offered engines that ranged from the quiet 318 cubic inch V8 to the fierce 426 max wedge. With that larger heart beating under the hood, the 440 transformed from a mild midsize into something capable of startling even seasoned drivers. It did not shout or pose, it simply gathered its strength and lunged forward, pulling harder than anyone expected from a car that looked so ordinary. Stories survive of these max wedge 440 machines, surprising racers at small drag strips, their plain faces hiding the kind of power usually reserved for legends. And perhaps that is why this Dodge remains so forgotten. It never cared about fame, it only cared about the moment when the light turned green, and the world behind it disappeared. The 1957 AMC Rambler Rebel belongs to a moment in Detroit when rules were still being invented, when categories blurred, and ideas moved faster than the names used to describe them. At a time when American roads were crowded with oversized luxury machines on one side and tiny budget compacts on the other, AMC chose a path in between. They shaped a mid-size Rambler that carried the quiet practicality families wanted, then slipped a 327 cubic inch V8 beneath its hood, creating a machine that did not fit neatly into any box. Its modest four-door frame made it easy to overlook. Nothing about the Rebel's appearance warned you of the torque waiting behind that simple grille. Yet those who drove it in its early days still recall how the car stepped forward with surprising confidence, lighter on its feet than the full-size giants of the era, and far stronger than the compacts meant to save pennies. In many ways, the Rebel was an early sketch of what muscle would become. An honest mid-size shape wrapped around a big engine eager to breathe. Collectors may argue about definitions, but few deny the Rebel's place as one of the first attempts to fuse everyday practicality with real American power. It is the kind of car memory often forgets, until someone opens the hood and the past stirs awake again. The 1956 Studebaker Golden Hawk arrived like a spark from a company that was already losing ground, a sudden reminder that courage sometimes appears at the edge of decline. Studebaker had long been known for practical, plain machines, cars built for budgets rather than bragging rights. Yet the Golden Hawk broke from that history with the confidence of something entirely new. Its long hood, its crisp roofline, its poised stance gave it a presence Studebaker had never shown before, a look that hinted at speed even before the engine stirred. Beneath that striking shape lived a V8 with roughly 275 horsepower, a remarkable number for a car that carried far less weight than the luxury giants of its time. Drivers who first stepped into a Golden Hawk learned quickly that this was no polite cruiser. The car pushed forward with a surprisingly eager rhythm, climbing through the revs with enough force to unsettle Thunderbirds and even early Corvettes. On the open road, the balance of light body and strong engine created an urgency few expected from a brand known more for economy than excitement. Its story faded as Studebaker slipped into memory, leaving the Golden Hawk as one of the great what-if moments of American performance. Collectors still stumble when they find one, unsure how a company so modest managed to build a machine so bold. But that is the beauty of forgotten muscle. Sometimes, the loudest surprises come from the quietest corners. The 1955 Chrysler C-300 marked the moment when American performance first slipped into a tailored suit. Long before the muscle era took shape, Chrysler decided that a car built for victory did not need to look wild. It could wear clean lines, a confident roofline, and the quiet dignity of a luxury coupe, then hide a fierce heart beneath that calm exterior. The C-300 carried a Hemi V8 breathing through twin 4-barrel carburetors, a combination crafted not for boulevard cruising but to meet the demands of sanctioned stock car racing, at a time when race cars were still genuine showroom machines. Those who knew the era recall how drivers would walk straight from a dealership to the track, trusting the old promise that a win on Sunday meant a rush of customers on Monday. The C-300 embodied that belief. Its big engine pulled the long body forward with surprising urgency, the kind of force that made seasoned racers take notice despite its gentlemanly appearance. It was powerful enough to stand beside the Chrysler letter cars that followed, yet refined enough to be mistaken for something far less serious. Over the years, the name 300 returned as a quiet luxury sedan, and most people forgot that the original was one of the earliest American supercars. Collectors sometimes overlook it as well, until they see the badge and remember a time when Chrysler decided that elegance and raw strength could live in the same silhouette. The 1949 Oldsmobile Rocket 88 is where the story of American muscle quietly begins, long before the name existed and long before Detroit realized what it had created. Oldsmobile took the big Rocket V8 from its heavier 98 sedans and slipped it into the smaller 78 body, a combination so bold for its time that even engineers later admitted they did not fully grasp what they had unleashed. The result was a car lighter than the giants of the day, yet driven by a modern high-compression engine that breathed deeper and pulled harder than anything its size had a right to. Those who witnessed it on the early stock car circuits remember the way the Rocket stepped out of a corner, the exhaust note turning sharp and confident as the big V8 gathered itself. In those early years of NASCAR, when the cars on the track truly were the cars you could buy on Monday morning, the Rocket 88 became the machine to chase. From the first season through the next few years, it found victory again and again, pushing the other manufacturers to rethink what performance could look like once weight and power were finally balanced with intent. Over time, the Rocket 88 faded into the background of Oldsmobile's long history, overshadowed by later eras and louder legends. Yet collectors who rediscover it often pause, realizing that this quiet fastback was not merely an early experiment but the spark that lit the fuse for everything the muscle era would become. It stands at the end of our journey as the first whisper of a revolution that Detroit would spend decades learning to shout. Every forgotten machine we met today carried a piece of the American story, from quiet prototypes to full-size rebels that bent the rules before anyone noticed. If these moments stirred something in you, let your support guide the next journey. A like helps the story travel farther, and a subscribe keeps you with us at American Muscle Soul as we uncover the legends time tried to erase.